Well, you've done it, Dragon Ball Super. I've been upset with sagas before. It comes with the territory. There's no series of anime that just has perfect sagas every time. Like, every anime is gonna have that has arcs that isn't just one series and it's over, like another or an anime that has 20 episodes probably to it. But every anime has a bad saga, a or a saga that isn't quite as good as the others. Even Dragon Ball Z has its bad sagas. A lot of people say the Garlic Jr. saga. Me personally, I think it's the Majin Buu saga. We've been over this. Check out my favorite sagas in each of the saga reviews along with this one, because it'll all be in the playlist. Also, it'll be on this picture the whole time, so if you're driving your car, this will give you something to listen to. If you're working on a project, again, something to listen to. If you're doing something where you need to multitask, this is something to listen to, because I'm not going to bring up pictures or anything. I've kept you guys waiting long enough. This is my thoughts on what people are calling, people call it the Future Trunks arc or the Future Trunks saga. I personally call this the Zamasu arc, and I've always done that. I call this the Zamasu saga, and the reason I call this the Zamasu saga is because the Zamasu is the main antagonist. He is the conflict. He's the confrontation of the saga. I didn't even call the Champa arc the Champa arc. I called it the Universe 6 tournament, because it was a tournament between Universe 7 and Universe 6, but Universe 7 is supposed to be like our team. That's supposed to be the team that we represent. We learn about the story. The story revolves around the characters in that universe. So they're the protagonists, making Universe 6 the antagonist. So, yeah, I call this the Zamasu saga because this is the saga that involves their confrontation with Zamasu. So, with that all out of the way, you know what? I'm not even completely mad right now, because I'm going to talk about all the good things first, and then we'll dive into the bad things, and oh boy, when we dive into them, we'll dive into them. I might even do an annotation deal where it's like, if you want to hear my pros, listen from this part to this part. If you want to hear my cons, listen from this part to the end of the video, because the cons are probably going to last the entire video, like the bulk of the video. But the pros, there's some pros in this saga, and I'm going to get them out of the way now so we can, sugar up our tongues before we go into this sour shit sandwich. So, the pros of the Zamasu saga, or the Future Trunks saga, or the Goku Black arc, or whatever you want to call it. The pros. I want to get this out of the way right now. The music is one of the greatest things about this entire saga. A bulk of just new tracks introduced into the Dragon Ball Super series, and they're great songs. I always felt, there's this one song, I think it's called Time. It's just called Time. But it's the song that was used to show off the trailer for when Trunks was telling the audience about what was going on and the gist of what his saga's going to be. And it's my favorite song out of the entire saga. And then we got the, I guess you can call it the preview to the next episode's song. Really good. Several other songs, several great orchestrated pieces to show off Zamasu. I like the Desperate Assault theme. That's really good. It's the theme that played when Trunks was powering up and he turned into Super Saiyan WTF, which, yeah, that's the name I call it. So yeah, really great music. Beautiful music. Sumitomo score. Absolutely wonderful. Next thing I like, the atmosphere. Now, I know this dives into some other things, because the atmosphere that's going on with this one is the darkest atmosphere that Dragon Ball Super has ever been under. A lot of the fights in Dragon Ball Super show that there's not much really at stake. The only one being the Battle of Gods arc, where Beerus, if he was unsatisfied with the fights, he would blow up the entire planet. So Beerus was a threat within himself, but when you start to dive into it, Beerus mostly did fighting for sport, much like Goku and the others did, and he wanted to he went into his entire fit over pudding. So it kind of derails the whole taking Beerus seriously theme when you know that Beerus isn't really a villain. He's just doing his job for the sake of doing his job. And then when we move into later sagas, we see there's no real risk factor even in Resurrection F because Goku and Vegeta are both dangerously stronger than Frieza at this point. I mean, yeah, Frieza's stronger than one of them, but if both of them work together, they could defeat Frieza no problem. And if Frieza defeats one, then they can just simply take Frieza out with the other. So the atmosphere of this saga did a really good job. It was a post-apocalyptic, and they chose to do this central plot within Trunks' timeline rather than the main timeline, which I thought was going to seep into. The reason being is because the Android saga did this, where it took place in Trunks' post-apocalyptic future, and then shifted to the main saga as a prologue to main story type deal. So great using that atmosphere to our advantage because we finally get to see what it's like for Trunks to survive in this timeline for that moment. So yeah, and then there were lives at stake because there's no Dragon Balls in this timeline. So great atmosphere, great use of atmosphere. The villains. I gotta say, till the end, Zamasu was the most creative, most in-depth, most psychotic Dragon Ball Z villain, or Dragon Ball villain, I'm sorry, in the history of the series, and it was mostly because I could relate to a lot of what he was saying. Like, his motives for why he wanted to do evil kind of made sense. I mean, yeah, the way he came about it was kind of twisted and kind of corrupted him through the entire time, but it was that corruption that I liked about him. I liked how when he fixed tea, Gawasu noticed the tea was tasting kind of different to show that he was getting more corrupted. I like how the rose petals were swirling around Zamasu slowly to show that he was getting dark and all of and I like the fact that he chose to use Goku as his puppet, as a mannequin puppet for all of this by taking another timeline Goku's body, things like that. And with that all being said, it was really great. It was really nice to see that level of corruption on a villain that does explain a lot of things. Like, his main complaint was, why do we just sit here as Kais? Which I've always been asking that question myself. Why do the Kais just sort of sit around? And Zamasu asked that question, and we see that it's necessary for the Kais to sit around because they're simply supposed to watch over, and that pissed Zamasu off and made him, I feel like he's not the first person to ever have this thought. So Zamasu really related to me, and his plan was a bit convoluted, but it was a very complex one. It was definitely the most original one, and he's the only one to actually get away with wishing for immortality outside of Garlic Jr. So yeah, and then that goes into the next area, which is Kai backstory. We've seen a lot of Kais in the history of Dragon Ball, just in Dragon Ball in general, and I always wanted to know a lot more about the Kais, but the story isn't really about them, so there was no point of diving into them until we got to this saga, because this saga actually goes into a bit more of how the Kais work and what they have to go through, what's the process of being a Kai and everything like that. So it was good to see that these topics were actually pressed on in this matter. Granted, they didn't dive completely into them, but they did at least focus on them. The action. And this is probably the last and one of the best things. The action in this saga is damn good. Now, I love Dragon Ball for a lot of things, and Dragon Ball Z is my favorite anime ever, and the action being one of the biggest aspects of this anime. And definitely in Dragon Ball Super, and this saga in particular was one of the most action-packed. The fight scenes are beautiful, just really beautiful. When they happen, they are just at top notch. Most of them have been really good, most noticeably the Vegito fight versus Zamasu, and the Goku and Trunks versus Zamasu and Goku Black. So, action, really good. Really great sense of just, oh my god, there's a lot of beautiful animation going on and a lot of fast-paced fighting happening at this time. My only gripe is that there wasn't enough of it. That's one of the big issues I have, is that there wasn't enough action. So yeah, those are the good things. Now let's tackle this shitstorm. Where do I start? I guess we'll start off at the story. The story starts off pretty good, actually. With Goku Black, I came into this thinking, oh god, it's gotten this bad now that they have to make a clone Goku in order for us to have a decent villain. And I went in thinking this was the only villain we were going to have. And when we delved deeper into it, it seemed pretty obvious that Goku Black was Zamasu, because they shown Zamasu in the opening. So at this point, we started looking more and more into it, and I started thinking, wait a minute, Goku Black isn't like what I thought he was going to be. I thought he was just going to be, I'm everything that Goku is, except I'm evil. Grrr, fear my fan fiction fueled fury. Like, I thought that was what he was going to be. But he wasn't. He actually wound up being his own character. He was very mysterious, I think, is what set him off. The fact that we didn't know much about Goku Black is what made him appealing, which goes into my pros, which was the villains being the pros. Here's where things got bad, though. Where it got bad was when we finally figured out who Goku Black was. Then he just started becoming less and less and less interesting. Once we finally figured all of this out, the problem became this. Here's the staple problem I have with the story. It doesn't need to exist. And I know what you're thinking. Why is that the biggest problem you have? Because Dragon Ball Z ended Trunks well. And we're going to go into something I call the shadow symptom. If you've ever played Sonic games ever, in Sonic Adventure 2, Shadow the Hedgehog was introduced and he was really well received. He was supposed to die at the end of Sonic Adventure 2 due to his sacrifice, but they brought him back simply because it attracts fans. That's what they did with Trunks. Trunks attracts fans. They knew that bringing Trunks into the story would up the ratings, and they brought him in. They shoved him in the series. They shoved him in our faces, knowing full well that Trunks' story went from a great prologue and epilogue. The prologue being the history of Trunks. If you were ever to ask me, Tyrone, how would you watch Dragon Ball Z if you were to watch the Android Saga? Here's how I would tell you how to watch it. Do not watch the Android Saga first. Watch History of Trunks. Watch the TV special History of Trunks first. Then watch the Android Saga. Then, after that, the final episode of the Android Saga, which is the epilogue episode for Trunks, which is the one, I think it's called Days of Future Past or whatever, or something like that. Sorry if I messed up the title. But it's the episode where Trunks comes in and destroys Android 17 and 18 and Perfect Cell. This puts a close on the book that is Trunks. This timeline doesn't need to be touched anymore. This timeline was free to just be a conclusion that can slowly rebuild and have Trunks as its savior. That was it. That was all that needed to be said. The fact that they brought Trunks back reopened a lot of things. Oh, what did he do against Majin Buu? Oh, what did he do? We didn't need that. We didn't need it. Trunks had a fulfilling ending. He had a final ending. And what this saga does is bring him back. My second issue, and this is where people kept telling me to let things go. That's what I had to keep doing in this saga. I had to keep letting things go. Trunks' hair is the wrong color. Let it go. Mai's in this timeline, and she's not dramatically older than Trunks is, even though Mai is older than Bulma. Bulma's 50-something in this timeline, which means Mai should be about 54, maybe 60. Let it go. I can't keep letting things go like this. How did Zamasu even end up with Goku Black's body? They explain it in a very convoluted and messed up way, showing that Zamasu went back in time after fighting Goku from our main timeline, and then going back to an alternate timeline, killing that Goku, and then killing the others, taking Goku's body, and then going to the future, killing Gowasu, getting the time ring, and all of that. It's just, and then teaming up with Zamasu from that timeline so that they can team up, so that they can use the Super Dragon Balls to wish for immortality, so that they can go back into Trunks' timeline and, first of all, time travel shouldn't be this frustrating. The Android Saga already did this And it wasn't as frustrating. There is some small plot holes, but I recommend you watch Quaman's timeline video where he fully explains the explanation for what happened in each of the timelines within the history of Trunks, the main timeline, the untold timeline, and others. He actually does a full explanation of what happens, and it's because the timeline was used only a couple of times within the Android saga of Dragon Ball Z that it works. Dragon Ball Z Super, it's used way too much between the time machine going back and forth constantly and the time ring making Zamasu, future Zamasu, main timeline Zamasu, Goku Black going back and forth in time made it super frustrating. Nothing but just frustration. So after we get all of that mess out of the way, the other problem I have is not just the fact that they're pandering to the fans, because they even have Trunks turn Ultra Super Saiyan briefly when he's fighting against Vegeta. And the reason they did that was to pander to the fans. And a lot of people keep telling me, oh, you can't compare Dragon Ball Super to Dragon Ball Z. That's unfair. They're two different series. Dragon Ball Super uses Dragon Ball Z as an IV of life support to live. Everything that Dragon Ball Super does is just, hey, look at this. Dragon Ball Z did it. Dragon Ball Z did it. Dragon Ball Z did it. We're so cool, right? We're so cool. We want to be Dragon Ball Z so bad because why? Because everybody loved Dragon Ball Z, so they're going to love us if we do Dragon Ball Z stuff, right? That is not good storytelling. Just because Dragon Ball Z did something doesn't mean you copy it in order to make it better. If you don't want me to compare the two, then stop using the other source material so much. Now, I know someone's going to sit here and say, oh, well, the only reason your favorite saga, the Android saga, exists is because of something that happened in Dragon Ball. However, what Dragon Ball does is that it does a smooth transition into Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball Super doesn't even happen. Dragon Ball Super happens years after Dragon Ball Z's already been finished, comes back and goes, hey, remember that Dragon Ball Z you loved so much way back years ago? Well, we're going to try to replicate it. The problem with this is you run into inconsistent stories, you run into problematic things, giant plot holes, messed up dialogue and story where it doesn't need to be, and the uselessness of certain techniques just for the sake of bringing them back. This was the biggest problem I had. There's a bunch of things that were just overseen here simply because they were throwbacks that were just thrown away. One of these examples is the Mafuba, a technique that was used in Dragon Ball. If you weren't familiar with Dragon Ball, I read the Dragon Ball manga, but if you want to go back and watch the Dragon Ball anime, a long time ago, King Piccolo attacked an entire area, and they needed to save the world from King Piccolo. Master Roshi's master ended up using a technique known as the Mafuba in order to send King Piccolo into a rice cooker and trap him in there so that he can't terrorize the world anymore. He also used the seal in order to make sure it would never open, but then, Emperor Pilaf and them broke it and it opened. Anyway, the Mafuba is brought back up again because the Zamasu that they're fighting is immortal because he used the Super Dragon Balls to become immortal. They can't kill him, so the only way that they're going to be able to stop this Zamasu is to seal him up in the Mafuba jar. Goku learns the Mafuba in a day. Okay, you know what? I was upset by that, but then I thought about it. I'm sure Goku can learn it, and it didn't bother me. At least they took an episode for him to do it. Then Goku gets there, forgets to get the jar, Trunks has to wind up doing it, and Trunks learns the goddamn Mafuba in 5 fucking minutes. And I'm like, really? And then that's not even the worst part. He does the Mafuba on Zamasu, and they forget the goddamn seal. Don't you think that's something that would have been important to remember? Oh my goodness, are you fucking kidding me? So yeah, the Mafuba doesn't even work, which means it was pointless. And then here's another useless technique, the goddamn Patara earring fusion. So get this. Goku and Vegeta end up fighting off against Zamasu when he's and Black, because Goku Black and Zamasu fuse together to make this really powerful being who's immortal and he's just godlike strong. Goku and Vegeta can't beat him. So what they have no choice but to do the fusion. Now what they do, they take Supreme Kai's Patara rings and fuse together in order to make Vegeta. Apparently The fusion, Potara Fury fusion now has a time limit of 1 hour. Yeah, that's right. That thing that you were told that was permanent for basically most of your life, turns out that's bullshit. Only way it's permanent is with a Kai, which is false because Kibito isn't a Kai. You can make the argument, oh, Supreme Kai is in the fusion, and since he's one of the hosts, that makes the entire fusion permanent. No, the only time it should be permanent is if it's between two Kais. Don't retcon a rule and then make the rule so convoluted that it makes no goddamn sense. So Vegito is existing for all of 10 minutes and then he's gone. There was no point. That fusion and that Mafubo was completely pointless. It was just there to be there. So, yeah, between that and then don't even get me started. If we're talking about power-ups, god damn it, Trunks goes through a rage boost, which something really only Gohan should benefit from, but apparently Trunks gets it, and Trunks ends up transforming into Super Saiyan WTF. I call it that because there's no explanation for what the fuck it is. There's no power scaling. There's nothing. We don't know what it is. Trunks exerts God-like ki, but there's still like Super Saiyan in it, and it's so frustrating because they don't explain what the fuck it is. At least Dragon Ball Z has the decency to explain different levels of transformations. When Vegeta transformed into Super Vegeta, it was known that Vegeta reached a higher level of power, but he didn't quite make it to Super Saiyan 2 yet. It was learned that Super Saiyan 2 was finally achieved when Gohan made the Super Saiyan transformation. There is no explanation for what the fuck Trunks did. He just did it. And I have to accept it. And don't even get me started on accepting things. Towards the end of the saga, Trunks ends up absorbing all the energy from all 15 of the humans that are still alive. Yeah, 15 of them. Yeah. So it ends up creating a spirit bomb. And yeah, trust me, it gets stupider. He absorbs the spirit bomb into his broken sword to make this giant spirit sword. First of all, how the fuck does Trunks even know the spirit bomb? I mean, I can get him learning the Gallic gun and the Final Flash. They did that because, oh, wouldn't it be really cool if Trunks knew Vegeta's fucking attacks because that's his son? Ooh. But this was just fucking stupid. Really? There's no explanation for why he does it. He just does it. There's no him learning this technique prior, and he just absorbs it to make this Deus Ex Machina ass sword that somehow has the ability to cut the fusion Zamasu in half, even though Vegito couldn't beat fused Zamasu. So this cuts him in half, and then once we get done with all of that, the shittiest thing happens. Zamasu takes over the entire universe because yeah, he died, but only the Goku black half of him, I was gonna say only the black half of him only the Goku black half of him was mortal. His spirit is immortal and still lives on throughout the realms of the universe, and their only solution at this point, and I shit you not, is the fact that Goku befriended the Omni King. And now this is important because the Omni King appeared in the last saga, the Universe 6 saga. The Omni King gave Goku a button that allows him to summon the Omni King whenever Goku wants. See where this is going? Goku presses the button, the Omni King shows up, but not the one from the main timeline, our timeline, the one from the future timeline. The Omni King gets really confused. Goku's like, yo, blow this universe up. And that's the only way we're going to get rid of Zamasu. It's literally the only way. They've ran out of ideas. They wrote themselves into a corner. So what's the solution? Get rid of the entire goddamn universe. And let me tell you why this is bullshit. Now, I'm gonna calm down for a minute. Because this saga just makes me angry. And I'm gonna calmly tell you why it makes me angry. Because now it's been sounding more like a really furious, immature rant, and the rant part is long over, but there's still more to it. But this time I'm just going to calm down because I'm going to give you a leveled reason of why I'm upset. The reason that this makes me so mad is because destroying this universe essentially means that everything that Trunks did is out the window. And I'm not talking about the events of Dragon Ball Super. I'm talking about Dragon Ball Z. Now, when you mess with this saga, it could just be a bad saga. I don't care. I've been through bad sagas before. But when you mess with my favorite saga, that's when it gets personal. Because here's the deal. Picture, if you will, a story. Trunks' History of Trunks stuff, all the way to the epilogue episode of the Android Saga, all of that is one big story. It has a start, it has a finish. Technically, if you want to, you could watch the History of Trunks all the way up to the end of the Android Saga and just be done with Dragon Ball Z. You don't really have to watch everything else. I mean, you'd want some explanation as to who the hell these characters are, but essentially, okay, if you were watching it just for Trunks, just to watch Trunks, then this is a full arc for him. And what the Zamasu Saga does is that it takes all of that and says, fuck it, it's gone. All that progress, all that rebuilding, all that saving the world from the androids, fuck it, it's gone. It's just not, it doesn't exist. It'll never exist. And then that leads me to their solution. Their solution, Trunks and Mai are still alive, and their solution is to actually go to a timeline that's like this one. Only difference is that it's not. And Zamasu isn't there for some reason, which is dumb because there's a future Trunks and a Mai already in that timeline. So what are they gonna do? Kill their future, kill those two, and then take their places like Rick and Morty? Is it that bad? Is that what they're gonna have to do? Or is Trunks and Mai gonna serve as like overseers of that timeline and just not mess with anything? It's too messed up. It's way too messed up. The only way this would actually even make remote sense, and they never show us this because they're in such a hurry to end the saga, because even they know that this is a problem. The only solution would be to send Trunks and Mai to that timeline and have them stay with Dende and Popo. That's the only solution I can possibly think of. Because this is just so frustrating. They tried so hard to clean up the mess that they made that they ended up destroying it. It's a fucking timeline. They destroyed events. They destroyed things. Rather than fix anything, they destroyed it. They fucked up. This is a mess up. Now, let me go into interpretation of what I think should have happened. Because it's simple. It's a simple fix. What they could have done is just keep Trunks here, in this timeline. Now, a lot of people would be like, oh, but then there'll be two Trunkses still. No, Kid Trunks and Future Trunks are basically two different characters. Hell, they got two different colored hair now, thanks to that fuck up. But they're essentially two different characters, and this series has no problem having two of the same character in one thing. They've done it before. Like, I don't see why this would be a big issue now. This series has done weirder stuff, okay? So, yeah. Future Trunks being in this timeline, he's developed his own identity. He's kind of his own person. And the other reason this backs up more of it, a lot of people want to know what I think about the survival arc, which I will do a discussion on it. But this is one of the reasons why Trunks should have stayed. Then we can just take out Master Roshi because he doesn't really need to be on the goddamn team and just replace him with Future Trunks. Our team would be set. That's a good team right there, actually. But moving back to the problem at hand. The problem at hand, when you do this, when you make this decision, is the fact that when you bring this type of thing into the Dragon Ball's lore, you're shooting yourself in the foot when you do these things to your story. Because when you do these things in your story, you create messes. And this is why when a story successfully ends, you should leave it alone. Because then it creates plot holes. It creates inconsistencies. It creates problems. And this was just a giant problem. One problem after another. And there was no way to fix it. Why did you make Zamasu immortal if you couldn't find a way to handle it? Oh, you did have a way to handle it. It was the Mafuba. But I guess that just wasn't cool enough. We just had to have Trunks' giant fuck you slash a fused Zamasu. That had to be our ending for this ridiculous saga. And one of the other things that I have a problem with, it's too fast. It's way too fast. A lot of people have stated that Dragon Ball Z has a problem sometimes of dragging. Hence why they call it Dragon Ball Z sometimes. Me personally, I've never really had that big of a problem except for in the Frieza saga. I will admit the Frieza saga pandered on for a bit for some time for dumb reasons. And that's mostly the manga's fault. But this was going too fast for what was going on. If you're going to make a saga that's revolving around a character from Dragon Ball Z and it's doing a lot of the things that Dragon Ball Z already did, you have to make things longer, especially for a character who's been missing in action for 2 fucking sagas, not even counting the Battle of Gods and Resurrection F and Universe 6 stuff. Trunks has been missing for so long. They literally had to play catch up. Because when Trunks fights Goku in the test fight, he turns Super Saiyan 2. Okay, he gained Super Saiyan 2. Congratulations. The problem with this is, the main issue with this is Super Saiyan 2. And yes, you can argue Goku's gotten stronger in his base, so his Super Saiyan 3 is stronger than the Super Saiyan 3 that he used in the Majin Buu saga because it's got God, Goku in it, and whatever. But so you can't argue Trunks has gotten so much stronger since then. He still is far behind Goku and Vegeta. Way too far behind. Too much of the story has gone by to justify Trunks getting these sudden boosts of strength. Too much. Way too much of the story has happened. So now Trunks has to play catch up. Something that should have been focused on, I don't know, all of the other characters we have in this timeline. You can't even boost Piccolo, Yamcha, Tien, Chaozu, and Krillin's powers, but you're gonna focus on Trunks's? And you're gonna try to do it within a 20-something episode time span? Get that shit out of here! You haven't even focused on Gohan. Yes, Gohan made a resolution to stop fighting, and I was okay with that. But apparently, the fans have beaten the crap out of the studios to make it so that Gohan can fight again, because he's gonna fight again. Everybody got what they wanted. Fine, whoop-de goddamn do. But then that just means, how is Gohan gonna fill in those gaps? Yeah, he's got the ultimate form, but is that enough? Is that enough, really? Based on 2 sagas that have passed, one of them showing that you need God Ki in order to even be considered useful in Super. It's just, this saga, everything about it has been one mess after another, and it was a rush job. It was a rush job. It was them not paying attention to what they were doing. It was them just making stuff up on the fly. There's even a moment where this happens. Goku Black makes tons of clones of himself, and he makes a giant scythe. And why does he do this? He gets angry. He's like, Vegeta's kicking my ass. Let me get angry to fill in that power gap that Vegeta had on me for a couple of seconds. And he just makes a riff in time and space and makes a bunch of clones, and Vegeta's like, what's going on? And Goku Black is like, IDK. I don't know. He says this. This is unacceptable in any anime. This is unacceptable. This is really unacceptable. Like, by every means. I would have accepted a BS answer before that. Goku Black becomes so much less interesting the minute we learn that he can turn Super Saiyan Rose, and we find out that he's really Zamasu. It becomes so much less interesting. Like, he becomes literally just what I said he was gonna be. A Goku clone. There's not much off of him anymore. And yes, I'm not just saying that because I'm mad. I'm saying it because he actually does become more and more like Goku each time, because he has Goku's body. And yes, he doesn't have Goku's heart or brain, But what ends up happening is that Goku's fighting instinct starts taking over, which is why he doesn't want to be immortal like Zamasu, because hell, if you had just made them both immortal, the story would be over. So he becomes more, the fighting instinct becomes more like Goku, so he's literally becoming Goku, the Goku clone. So it's just, that happened, and it's just one headache after another. I gotta say, the start of this saga showed promise. There was a lot of things that actually had me interested. The Kai development, Zamasu, the mysteriousness of Goku Black and the fact that he had his own identity. All of this stuff was really, really interesting. I had to let some things go, like Trunks' stupid blue hair and everything else. But once I started, getting by, it was good. And then suddenly Zamasu was revealed to be Goku Black, and shit just got bad. It just got bad. They were writing themselves further and further and further into a corner. And it's a good thing they had that Zeno save button, or else they would have been screwed. Because it was getting just stupid. And one of the things I really didn't like was the fact that, one, Trunks had to go back, which proves that he can't even handle himself in a big situation. Two, they had to go back and forth. When Goku and Vegeta were getting their butts kicked, what did they do? They went back into the time machine. Then they came back immediately after, fought, then shit got real, then they went back into the goddamn time machine again. Are you kidding me? This isn't a video game. You can't just fail, get an extra life, and try again. Yes, I know what you're going to say. The Dragon Balls bring them back anyway. Isn't this the same thing? No, this isn't the same thing. This is a cop-out. You want to know why? Because in the future timeline, there are no Dragon Balls, which means you can't bring yourself back to life, which means the stakes are higher. So what did they end up doing? They copped out. They copped the fuck out and used the time machine to go back in time so that they can come right back, knowing that time travel is illegal, which is what Whis and Beerus was saying 1,000 times. Yet Whis and Beerus just sat on their asses and let them do it. And then Beerus destroying Zamasu, and I really hate how they tried to make it so Zamasu is killed in this timeline, which means the other Zamasu should get destroyed. No! I'm not even going to sit there and accept that. 2 reasons. 1, because Dragon Ball Z followed a clear multiverse theory that was a really good multiverse theory. It didn't cover up all the plot holes, but it did a good job of making sense. So I'm not even going to accept that. This saga was just, it's the most frustrating saga. Does that make it the worst? Not really, actually. It's not the worst, but it's the most frustrating. And that's, I think, what causes the problems. So yeah, it's just, it's frustrating, and it makes me mad, and I hate that it makes me this mad. So yeah, honestly, you could skip it, honestly. The only difference is we get an extra Omni King, but you can technically skip it. So with that said, I'll see you all in the survival arc. See you all then, everybody. Tyrone the God 3 out. I'm sorry I was so angry. It's just, the saga.